Thanksgiving used to be Sarah's favorite holiday. But ever since her husband passed away 3 years ago, it just turned into the loneliest day of the year. Her daughter lived way out in California, and because of the distance, she couldn't make it down every year. On this particular Thanksgiving night, Sarah was sitting all by herself at the dinner table. She was trying to pick at the turkey she'd cooked, not because she was actually hungry, but just out of habit. Around 8 that evening, she heard a knock on the front door. It caught her completely off guard since she wasn't expecting a soul. Sarah lived on an old farmhouse about 5 miles out from the nearest town, right at the end of a dirt road. Cars hardly ever drove down her way, and usually, anyone who ended up out there was totally lost. At first, she figured maybe one of her friends had dropped by to check on her. She wiped her hands on her apron and went to open the door, but the second she pulled it open, she was stunned. Standing on her porch was a young boy, maybe 16 years old, shivering uncontrollably from the cold. He was wearing ripped jeans and a filthy, oversized shirt. His feet were completely bare and caked in wet mud. But the thing that really caught her attention was his eyes. There was something deeply wrong with the way he looked at her. The boy asked if she had any food. He said he hadn't eaten in days. His voice was quiet and ice cold. But seeing him standing there, shoulders slumped, arms hanging lifelessly by his sides, she believed him. She felt like he really needed help. She told him to come on in. He followed her inside without saying a single word, walking in this strange way, almost dragging his feet along the floor. They got to the dining table, and she pulled out a chair for him. She served him a full plate of turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, and cranberry sauce. The boy sat down and just stared at the plate for a long time. Then he picked up his fork. But strangely enough, he didn't dig in like someone who had been starving for days. He just slowly pushed the food around with his fork. He would raise a bite toward his mouth, then lower it right back down without eating a thing. Sarah found it weird and asked him if the food tasted okay or if he wanted her to make him something else. He looked right at her, dead serious, and said, "You overcooked it, and it ruined the meat." After that, he didn't do a thing. He just sat there, staring straight at her with a creepy, unsettling smile on his face. Right then, Sarah started feeling like she'd made a huge mistake letting him inside. She gathered her courage and told him she was sorry, but he couldn't stay there. She mentioned a motel down the road he could head to. The boy stood up real slow. He kept staring at her with that same unblinking gaze. Sarah stood up too and started backing away toward the front door. Suddenly, she realized just how quiet the house was and how far away her nearest neighbor lived. After a few painfully long seconds, the boy turned around and walked out of the house without saying another word. The moment he stepped outside, Sarah slammed the door shut and locked it tight. She checked to make sure every single window was locked up and promised herself she would never let another stranger into her house again, no matter how desperate they looked. She tried to sleep that night, but the image of that boy and his bizarre behavior kept playing over and over in her head. Around 2 in the morning, she suddenly woke up to the sound of her chickens screaming in terror. At first, she thought a wolf or a coyote had gotten into the coop, since that happened sometimes. She grabbed a flashlight and hurried outside. As soon as she stepped off the porch, she noticed white feathers scattered all over the ground, forming a trail that led straight to the coop door. Her heart began to pound violently. She followed the trail of feathers. When she reached the coop, she saw the door wide open, hanging crooked as if it had been ripped off its hinges. Inside, there was a terrifying silence. The only thing she could hear was someone humming an old tune. She pointed her flashlight toward the noise, and right then, she froze in her tracks. It was the same boy. He was sitting in the corner of the coop with his back turned to her, rocking back and forth while humming that strange melody. The creepy part was, Sarah actually recognized that tune. Her grandmother used to sing it way back during harvest season. She summoned her courage and called out to him, asking what he was doing there. In that moment, he stopped rocking. Silence filled the air for a few terrifying seconds. Suddenly, he turned his head around, but he didn't turn it normally. He spun his head completely around to face her, wearing a nightmare of a smile. Sarah gasped in pure horror. The boy had no face left. The skin on his face was entirely gone, exposing raw red meat and dark veins reflecting off the flashlight beam. Then she noticed something black dripping from between his teeth as he chewed slowly. He was eating her chickens while they were still alive. Sarah doesn't even remember dropping the flashlight. All she remembers is running toward the house with everything she had, like her life depended on reaching the door before that thing caught her. When she reached the house, she slammed the door behind her so hard the whole frame shook. She threw the deadbolt, grabbed her phone with shaking hands, and dialed 911. The operator asked what was happening. Sarah tried to explain about the boy, about his ruined face, and about him eating her chickens alive. But as she spoke, she knew her story sounded completely insane. The operator assured her that the police were on their way. Sarah sat in the kitchen with every light in the house turned on, clutching a butcher knife from the drawer while she waited. About 20 minutes later, the police arrived. They had flashlights and radios, and they began searching the entire property. Sarah watched them through the window. After a while, they came back to the house. They told her they had searched the coop thoroughly, but it was completely empty. The only thing they found were 3 dead chickens. There was no sign of the boy anywhere. Even weirder, they said there were no footprints at all around the coop, except for Sarah's own tracks. Then they started asking if she'd been drinking, or if maybe she'd fallen asleep and dreamed the whole thing up. She tried showing them the feathers all over the yard and the blood inside the coop, but they just brushed it off, saying a coyote or a wild animal must have done it. Eventually, they told her to call them if anything else happened, and they left. Sarah couldn't sleep that night, or the night after. The horrifying image of his skinless face and that wide, unnatural smile kept haunting her. Weeks passed, and even today, every time she walks into her kitchen, she feels like he's still right there, sitting in that same chair, pushing his food around with a fork without taking a bite. And the thing that still terrifies Sarah to her core is remembering the exact words he said while staring right at her. "You overcooked the meat, and it ruined it." After everything she experienced, Sarah is convinced that whatever knocked on her door that night wasn't human at all. Maybe it was a shapeshifter or some unknown creature, but it definitely wasn't a person.